The Custom Object and Field Mapping tool is an advanced tool that allows you to map custom fields and custom objects into TwoCanConnect. There'll be two parts to this video. The first part is just editing the existing field mapping that you get out of the box, and the second part is mapping custom objects from Salesforce to your invoices. As you can see, out of the box with TwoCanConnect, we already map all the data we need from our opportunity and our opportunity product into our invoices. If we want to change any of that mapping, we can use the Edit button here to open up our mapping console. The first section on the page allows you to map fields from your opportunity into our invoice. You can see here we can choose invoice date, due date. We can also bring in custom invoice numbers and reference numbers. In this example, I can change the invoice date to be the created date of the opportunity and the due date to be the close date of the opportunity. In these custom field mapping sections, we can also choose custom formula fields. This means that if you want to set the due date to something like the close date plus 30 days, your Salesforce administrator can create these fields for you in the opportunity, and you can select them from the drop downs inside of our mapping tool. I'll also add in a custom reference number here, where I'll just use the opportunity ID. As I scroll down, you can also see we map fields from our opportunity products into our invoice line item fields such as quantity, unit price, discount, and total. This is used if you have some custom calculations which you want to bring into the invoice to fill in these fields. In this example, we'll leave these all as the defaults. For some of your Salesforce objects, such as opportunities and orders, we can also change the line item description field mapping. By default, we'll use the same product name that you have in Salesforce as the product name on the invoice. However, we can actually change the way that our product name is displayed. We can either display the product name with a line item description that you enter in Salesforce, or we can use a custom field from your line item to bring in as the product name. If you're unfamiliar with the way that Salesforce works, for example, if I use the product name with the line item description, I'll jump over and look at an opportunity here. This is where it will use the product name and then also the default line item description field here to fill in the description on the invoice. For example, I might put in here, does not include travel. If I then save the line item, and then if I jump into an invoice, you'll see that that additional description also displays under the product name. You can also see the separator, which in this example is a pipe. That can also be changed to a dash, an underscore, or a slash. This is a great option if you want to be able to have some custom text that appears on your invoice for the customer. You may also use a complete custom field, which you can then select from the custom field section here. We've seen use cases of this where you may have some dates that you want to bring in automatically into the product name, or maybe you've got a customer facing product name that you want to use. Just like our section before, you can create a custom formula field on your opportunity line item, which you can then choose from this drop down. Once you've made the changes, you can click the Done button, which then saves them, and you can use them in your invoice object. The second section we can edit out of the box is what fields map from our Salesforce account and contact to our zero contact. I'm going to go ahead and edit this one here. This is where we can see our zero contact fields, and then we can see the relevant either Salesforce account fields or the Salesforce contact fields that you can pre-fill into the zero contact fields. For example, if I want to change the account number, which is a zero contact field, I can select a field from within my Salesforce account, such as my account number field. You might have another custom field on your Salesforce contact you want to use for email address. Again, you can change the field if you require. We give you the best mapping out of the box, but this is here so you can be flexible. Again, if you're holding other addresses, other phone numbers, and other different fields inside of your accounts besides what Salesforce gives you out of the box. I'm going to leave this as is. I'll then move over to a new invoice that we're creating where we've got a contact in there, and you can see that all the information on the page is pre-filled. Then we're also going to bring in Peter's contact, and you can see that it also pre-fills all of that information here as well. Moving on to the next page of the invoice creation process, you can also see that our invoice is pre-filled with the dates that we selected in the custom mapping. I've got an opportunity that I created today and closed today. It's also got the invoice reference number, and it's also got our product name with the dash and the free text that says does not include travel. The field mapping tool is really great to have that additional layer of flexibility inside of TwoCanConnect, where you can bring in any of those custom fields into the Xero contact and the invoice. Part 2 of this video covers if you want to use custom objects to create invoices that you can send to Xero. Out of the box, we give you the opportunity object mapping, but you can choose to bring in either standard objects such as cases or orders, or custom objects that you've created that you want to invoice from. In this example, we're going to use the cases object to map into TwoCanConnect. The first thing you have to do when mapping a custom object is to create a lookup field on the invoice to that object. I'm in Salesforce Lightning here, but the same process still applies if you're in Classic. So I'm going to go to Salesforce Setup. I'll then go into the Object Manager and search for invoice. Make sure you select one with the TCC Xero API name. Go to Fields and Relationships. Click New. We're then going to select a lookup relationship. And then we're going to select the object that we want to map to. In this example, we're mapping to the case object. I'm going to leave all these fields as standard, but you can rename that lookup field if you require. You then need to set up your field level security. This is usually okay to leave as default, but please work with your Salesforce administrator if this needs to be changed. We will add the field to our page layout. And then we're going to have a related list called invoices, which we're going to add to all of our case layouts. We can then click Save. Now that the field is created, we can go back into the configuration, and then in the invoice and line item custom field mapping sets, we can click New. This is where I can go and select an object, in this example, a case. I can then choose to map my dates, my invoice number, and my reference numbers. These are also optional. You don't have to enter them. But the key part here is to make sure that we select our record ID. This is our case lookup field that we just created on the invoice. This is how we know which objects we can use with TwoCanConnect, and when an invoice is created, what record it should be linking back to. In this example, the case. Now we don't just map the parent object in terms of a case. We can also map any child objects as well. These child objects need to have a master detail relationship to the parent object that we've selected above. As an example of this, I'm going to jump into a case, and you can see I've got a child object here named case line items. This is a custom object that I've created, and inside of the custom object, there's a master detail relationship to the case object, and there's also a custom fields. If I just jump over to the object manager, you can see this here. So I have my master detail field, I have a field for price, quantity, total price, and I also have a lookup to a product. The product lookup is optional, as are all of the other fields here. If you do use a product lookup, it means you can track inventory, and it means you could also pull in items into the child object to then pick up on the invoice. I can then create a new case line item where I'm going to pull in my development work per hour rate. I want to say 5 hours at $150, and I'll save that line item. Let's jump back to the configuration page, and now I'm going to choose my case line item object in here. You can now see we can map all of the fields that we need. So I can map the quantity, I can map the price. I don't have any discount fields, so I don't want to map that. I can also map the total price. If you are using quantity and price, you don't have to have a total price field. It will calculate that for you at the invoice level. If you do have that product lookup, you can select that from the bottom drop down here. If you do select that lookup field it will automatically pull in the product name into the invoice. However, if you either don't use the product lookup or you want to have a custom field for the product name, you can select that from the list here as well. I'm going to leave this empty. Once I'm happy with all of the mapping, I can click the Create button. And you can now see that the case and the case line item have been added into the mapping sets here. Again, as I mentioned before, you do not have to have a child object mapped in order to create an invoice from your preferred object. It just means that if you don't have a child object mapped, when you get to the invoice screen, you'll need to manually add in all the line items you want to charge for. Now we've created that mapping set, we now also have to create a button in order to launch the invoice creation tool. Luckily, we have this custom object button creation tool that we can use to automatically create a button inside of our object that we can add to our page layout and then launch the invoice creation tool. It's really simple to use, so I'm going to click Launch. We then have to select what object we want to create the button on, and you can see we can only choose the opportunity or the case because it's just pulling through our mapping sets here. We then have to choose a field on the object that links back to our Salesforce account. In this example, I'm using the case object, which has the account field in there by default. If you're using any custom objects, then you will need to have a lookup field to your Salesforce customer account. This is how we pull the information from the account into the invoice section so we know who to invoice. We can then select our mapping set that we're using for this button. It's worth noting that you can create multiple different mappings for the same object. So for example, for the cases object, maybe you want a button that has the child object and maps fields from that child object. Maybe have another button in there that doesn't map from the child object. This gives you the ultimate flexibility with TwoCanConnect because you can create multiple buttons and map different fields and different objects to those buttons. In this example, we only have one mapping set. This is the unique ID that we saw in the table in the previous page. So we'll select that one. We can then also choose the button type we want to create. If you don't know what button types are, there's a nice help article here that you can use where it tells you exactly what those button types do. We're going to choose a detail page button because we want it to appear at the top of our case page that we can click on. We can then give our button a label. I'm going to give it the name of New Invoice with Line Item. In order to create the button, you can either copy the code to your clipboard by clicking the Copy Code to Clipboard button. Then you can go into your custom object or your case object in this example, and you can manually create the button. We also can do this in an automated way by clicking the Create New Button on Object button here. You can see that the button was then created. We then need to add it to our page layout to be able to use the button. So we can exit out of this. We can go to our case object in the Object Manager. We can go to our preferred layout. And I'm going to use the mobile action here. And I'm going to drag and drop that to be the first option in the lining experience. If you are using Classic, the button is also available in Classic as well. We're now going to save that layout. And you can see now on the case, we've got our New Invoice with Line Item button that we can click. Now this contact already existed within my Xero and I had it mapped into Salesforce. This is where that account ID field comes into play because we can pull all of the contacts against that account. I'm then going to click Next. And we'll see that all of our field mapping has worked. We have got our invoice date. Again, I created this case today and I closed it today as well. We have our product name here. We just used the standard product name to pull from that actual product ID. It's brought in our quantity and our unit price, and it's also calculated the total for us. We can then continue on and either create the draft, submitted, or approved invoice. That's how we can map custom objects from our Salesforce into Xero and create invoices from them. This is quite an advanced feature, so if you do have any issues or questions, please feel free to log a case with our support team and we're more than happy to assist.